Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this Committee of the Whole Budget meeting. As we begin, I'll ask everyone to please silence cell phones and other electronic devices and remind Council that our procedure bylaw prescribes the use of technology. It is 5:01 p.m. I will call this meeting to order. The Municipality of Brighton Council respectfully acknowledges that we are meeting on the shared treaty and traditional territories of the Mississauga, also known as the Mississauga, Anishinaabe, and the Williams Treaties First Nations. The lands and waters that make up our municipality have been and continue to be the collective responsibility of these Indigenous communities who have been their stewards and caretakers for generations. We recognize that this area is home to many Indigenous peoples from across the region and Canada. We honor their enduring connection to this land and their significant contributions to its history and culture. As we gather to make important decisions for our community, let us also reflect on our shared responsibility to foster relationships built on mutual respect and understanding, and to work together towards creating a more just and equitable society. And the first motion for the approval of the agenda is moved by Councillor McCausland, seconded by Councillor Wheeldon, that the January 29th, 2025 Committee of the Whole agenda be approved as presented. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? The motion is carried. Members of Council, have you any declarations of pecuniary interest? And if so, please state the general nature thereof. Now, for the record, if any discussion comes up with regard to cemeteries, I am a member of the Church Council for Trinity St. Andrews United Church, and Trinity St. Andrews United Church is the owner and operator of the Hilton Cemetery, so I will recuse myself around any of those discussions. No delegations this evening. Madam Clerk, do we have any citizens' comments? Brings us to staff reports. The only report for us to consider this evening is the 2025 operating budget, and I'll turn the floor over to the CAO.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will begin just with a quick overview of our process. So this evening, we'll go through the operating budget. I will identify some areas that we chatted about just for the benefit of our new council members. So as we go through the package, there might be some repetition, but it's probably good for all of us. So this evening, we'll go through the operations. There are some things that council asked us to bring back, so we can chat about some of those things in preparation for our full day budget meeting on February the 7th. On February the 7th, I will ask each of the managers or directors, whoever's responsible for those departments, to come in and speak about any changes that we make following tonight. This budget is the same as what you received in your budget package. We haven't made any changes as of yet, so I will ask each of the managers and directors. I will also ask them to give a quick overview of their department, again, for the benefit of our new member, just so that there's an understanding of what they do and any changes that they've made financially to hopefully reduce, but I'm sure in some cases there will be some increases as well. So they will do that on the 7th, along with the grants and aid presentations that will happen on the 7th, and time for council to then deliberate. Hopefully we have some sense this evening, where council would like to be, and we can bring that back so we're relatively close. But anything at that point that you'd like to discuss, we'll deal with on February the 7th, and we'll make those adjustments for the public meeting on February the 18th. Again, following the February the 18th meeting, based on public comment and council discussion, we can make changes that are necessary prior to the approval date recommended for March the 3rd. So hopefully we get there in that fashion, but if we have to delay things along the way, that's okay too. So again, the budget as it stands includes a 7.67% increase, the capital portion being a 2.99% increase, which we talked about at the last meeting. We were asked to bring back the additional percentage if we included the grants and aid, and the additional percentage would reflect a 9.13% increase at this point. Again, we will look for some direction from council, just where your comfort level is, so we can work towards that for the 7th. We did talk about some things prior to budget. One of them was the doctor retention program. So you will see that will get included unless council this evening decides they don't want to, but that will get included on February the 7th for discussion. Another item was rain barrels. The doctor retention, we're looking at about a $50,000 allocation. The rain barrels, I think about a $15,000 allocation, and we've had some discussion about what that might look like, so we can chat about that. But those things were identified prior to budget and asked to be brought forward for budget deliberations, not necessarily included here, but we will reflect them on February the 7th. The grants and aid, as I indicated, was 9.13 was the total. So the grants and aid is the total that is allocated is 1.5% of your 2024 budget. So it's not quite a 1.5% addition to the 7.67 because that budget's slightly lower. So it reflects that 9.13%. And I think the other thing that we were talking about in the last meeting was looking at that blended rate. So the county we did confirm is the 6.12. We also confirmed that the education, there would be no increase. So if we look at that 7.67 and 9.13, I think our deputy treasurer is going to try to find those numbers for us before the end of the evening, just so we can see what that blended rate would look like. We chatted a little bit about non-negotiables and what, you really don't have a lot of options to change. I think mainly, it's the police contract. Obviously, we have to have that contract. We don't have a negotiating opportunity with that unless you wanted to look at changing forces, which I don't think is where this council is going to go. Certainly any contracts that we have already established in 2024. So in this operating budget, much of the increase is around staff wages and benefits, and that is due to the agreements that were signed this year with the union and the non-union. So those kinds of things, we can't change. That's already been approved by council. Aside from that, council can really decide which way that they want to go with most items. There certainly are some external budgets that you have little influence over, but there's always options. So if we go to the actual document, again, I'll just give a quick overview through here. So the guidelines for the budget are here and what we're looking to do. So the operating increases for the current level of service delivery, including the financing strategy for the future wastewater plant upgrades, which this budget does reflect having that increase, but there are some numbers in here that, or it does reflect the anticipation of the grant, which we were successful with. So there won't be a lot of change, but the borrowing capacity and that kind of thing, we will make some changes here because obviously we're not looking at $48 million any longer. The anticipated physician recruitment costs, and we'll chat about that a little bit. Fees and charges based on comparisons of benchmark municipalities. So we went through our user fees and charges bylaw a couple of meetings ago. And again, that's, looking at the neighboring municipalities and what their current fees and charges are and trying to be comparative to that. The infrastructure gap for taxation, water, wastewater. A business plan for land banking initiatives, which I know our director of planning is working on. The financial strategies for information technology master plan initiatives. So we've been going through that as well, and you will see a lot of those IT initiatives that are built in through each of these departments. Increase to the capital levy. The implications of the strategic plan. So we had an update. I know there was lots of discussion about the strategic plan and items that were allocated in the budget or looked at for strategic initiatives. So if there's other things as we have those discussions, we can certainly look at that. The community improvement plan, the software licensing, all of those things I think have been identified in here. So your impact to the taxpayer, again, just the budget increase of 10.48% reflects a tax increase of 7.67. So 1% of your budget increase is $122,403, and 1% of your tax increase is $125,607. On page 5, we can chat just a little bit about the assessment growth being $320,423. That is the increase in assessment from 2024. So our budget is reflected of that. We have reduced the overall increase by that 320 based on the assessment. Your budget timetable, which I've gone over, highlighted where we are today. The next page, again, you have your neighboring municipalities and where they're at. Items not included in this budget, again, your grants and aid, which we've chatted about, the private road grant, and the transfer to reserves for future positions. The challenges and opportunities. So the challenges, again, your wages and benefit costs, you'll see through each of the operating budgets that those are increased. Increase in training for public works. There was a larger increase actually in 2024, which has been slightly reduced for 2025, but I know they're trying to do a lot of cross-training and ensuring that we have our operators able to operate all of the equipment as opposed to just specific equipment so that we have those redundancies in place. Our opportunities, the increase in the OMPF funding of $209,400, decrease in bank rates, the modernization funding that remains, the phase-in approach for the OPP, and the flexibility in the internal debt payments. So your page 7 just identifies again that tax increase versus the 2024 growth. And where we're looking at this budget, so a total increase of $962,938. Your external budgets here, and I suppose not that they're not negotiable, but they're definitely not something that that you can really play with at this stage or try to reduce. Your service delivery increases, capital expenditures, and the total internal department increases. Total grants and aid, again, that amount, that 1.5% is $183,605. Moving to page 8, again, we identify the development charges study, which is underway. I think I may have said February the 3rd at the last meeting. That presentation will be coming back on February the 18th. So Watson will be here to deal with the development charges as well as our water wastewater rate study. And your list of reserve funds. Your internal loan schedule on page 10 with 2025 highlighted. Our current external debt. And again, those interest rates. And I think, we chatted at the planning meeting about what we're looking at right now with IO. And, they're just over 4% and hoping that, I guess closer to 4.5%, hoping that some of those rates will go down so that we can look at some of that internal borrowing that we're currently doing and move it to an external source. Water department, wastewater department. Again, just identifying each of those loans, when they were taken out, what the terms are. My favorite number, the borrowing for wastewater plant, 48 million, which will be reduced by that 35. Okay, moving on to your grants and aid. So again, the number that that you currently have allocated. This one, I believe we're looking at the $21,800 is what you're in excess of. There was some communication recently, though, that one is going to be withdrawn. So that's going to bring us back down to much closer to your 183,000.
If I may, CAO, so Trent Memorial Hospital is the one you're referring to. It will be they're going to ask to withdraw it, but they're also going to ask for a pledge over 5 years of a significantly higher number. Okay. So not really going away.
It might fix the grants and aid issue, but
yeah. In fairness, I don't want to give away their nice surprise, but they are trying to raise many millions of dollars for a new ER emergency room. So
okay, you have those there. I know we have some that have requested presentations on February the 7th, so you'll have an opportunity to discuss those there. So I'm just, yeah, I think we're good. This page looks a little strange, but I think we're on track where we've plugged information in. So essentially your tax supported operating budget. You have your 2024 numbers, your 2025 numbers, obviously the changes to all of those. So I mean, I don't want to go through line by line. I think more importantly, this is your overview. We'll look at each department individually and just look at what those increases are. And then if there's discussion amongst council, questions about the departments, I'm happy to answer them. If we have the manager or director here, they can answer them as well. In all fairness, I did tell the managers and directors, we're at a point, we've gone through all of these. This wasn't a huge deliberation meeting. I can likely answer any questions that you might have with regards to any increases. We go into the capital, which we've already gone through. If you move to page 22, you have, again, your overview of the operating, your rate supported capital, and then your bottom line. So again, we have that 7.67%. The operating budget provides an increase of $1,231,247 or an 11.73% over the 2024 operating budget. There's plenty of different numbers and how they flow through. Your bottom line, like I said, currently is that 7.67% with your grants and aid, that 9.13%. So your general government overview, again, your numbers are there as far as your expenditures and your revenues. The overall change in your general government is $211,463. There's an outline here, so it gives you an overview of what it consists of. So the general government operating analysis contains the operating revenues and expenditures for council, CAO, human resources, clerk, information technology, and finance. And we'll break these out in the upcoming pages. The Justice, Equity, and Diversion and Inclusion Committee was new in 2024. You'll see that line item there with an allocated budget for 2025 of just over $10,000. An overview of the clerk's department and the responsibilities. Again, the finance department and the responsibilities there. Information technology, you will notice that some of the numbers are higher in our IT budget because it's been removed and separated from finance. So I think Linda thought it was much better to show the IT separate so you could see the money that was being allocated there. Your nominal changes on page 24. The municipality receives payments in lieu from the federal government for Warkworth Penitentiary. These have been declining, so you'll see a reduction there. The Ontario Municipal Partnership Fund, which I mentioned, did increase in 2025 by $209,400, so that was good. Supplementary taxes are levied for the year due to new construction, so we have a budgeted amount that will remain approximately the same in 2025 of $223,000. General government revenues include the host fees for the landfill from Northumberland County and fees and charges collected from marriage licenses, commissioning documents, burial permits, lottery license, tax certificates, and other administrative services. Your council expenditures, you're familiar with most of those, just your honorariums, any costs that you have related to conferences and training. CO department, again, just wages, legal, mileage, and office supplies. Administration building revenue relates to the costs from other departments, boards within this building, a transfer from development charges for the debt payment, and expenditures include the cost for maintaining the building, insurance, and debt repayment. The new initiatives, you'll see this new initiative come up in a number of departments because I think it reflects a number of departments. So staffing changes have been included to create a one-stop shop at Alice and a reception area that's a little more inviting, hopefully accessible. Right now, it is a little confusing for people when they come up. The position that was approved last year for clerks and planning, we've brought that to council to change that position, looking at a position for planning and public works at Sharp and an alternative position here that would be shared between finance and clerks to man that front reception area. So it's an addition of one person. Last year, that position for planning and clerks was never filled. So we made that change as we were looking at what was going to make sense for 2025. So again, you'll see some of that new initiative, I think, pops up in a number of departments. And the first draft of the budget will show an increase for general government. I'm sorry, a decrease in I think it's an increase, as I've got that there. No, I apologize, a decrease of $211,463. Likely a lot of that removal of the IT. I think I said increase at the beginning. Your health services budget. Again, we're looking at an increase there. The nominal changes, there have been payments made in the amount of, or there will be payments made, I'm sorry, in the amount of $55,000 in 2025. I don't think they've been made. The donations to the hospital fund have not been included, but again, we can discuss that and discuss other hospital initiatives. And we'll continue to make the loan payment to the Brighton Todd Memorial Community Fund and Infrastructure Ontario. The new initiatives, talking about the physician retention program, there's a number of things, that we've chatted about with regard to physician recruitment. You will see another report coming forward on February the 18th. Again, I had a conversation today with Paula Mason, who does recruitment and some things that they're looking for. I think I expressed the last time when we were talking about this, it seems like it's very much piecemealed. So I've asked that we sit down and we talk about, how we make this work for Brighton, as well as attracting new physicians. So we will have probably some discussion on February 18th, which might provide direction to staff on how you want to move forward and the flexibility. Also trying to align a little bit with Quinty so that when doctors are coming in, they're not looking at two different contracts. Quinty's had some flexibility to authorize some changes where I have said I'm bringing it back to council if there's any kind of even a nominal financial change to the contract that we currently have in place. So we'll have those discussions on February 18th, which might help form where we want to go with the allocated money for physicians in 2025. Again, we were asked to go back to the solicitor and talk about that retention program. So I did have a conversation with John Ewart. The reality is we're treading very lightly on the restrictions within the Municipal Act when we're doing this, but nobody's been challenged on it. So they're continuing in every municipality to offer these incentives. And it would be nice to find a better way. And I don't know that we're going to do that for 2025, even within these discussions, but long-term, it's certainly something that I would like to look at just with our own medical facility and how we attract doctors. And again, allocate the funds so that it's good for Brighton and also good for physician attraction. So this budget does reflect an increase of $108,411. And your cemeteries budget, it includes the revenue and expenditures from the Mount Hope Cemetery and grant and aid to other cemeteries within the Brighton geographical boundary. Mount Hope Cemetery is showing a decrease. Sorry, this says 2024. My apologies. We will take a look at that and make sure that we get that updated. The 2025 budget will provide a decrease of $37,058. Your fire department operating budget, your overall increase is 8.66%. It identifies here the makeup of your fire department with now 3 full-time staff as we increased that one position from part-time to full-time, and your 48 volunteer firefighters. The revenue includes the accidents on the 401, the rent, burn permits, and inspection fees. The administration expenses have increased by $69,736 due to the utility, fuel, insurance, and wages. And again, you'll see in most of the overview, it's insurance and wages and benefits in most of the departments. Overall, an 8.66% increase, which is relatively nominal, and $93,509. Your policing budget shows an increase of 9.76%. The change in this budget, the original information that came to us about the increase with the OPP was significant. It was closer to $400,000. Through some discussions, I think with the provincial government, they came back and made a reduction in everybody's bill. So this budget reflects the increase. I believe it's 83 and change. I'm sure it's in here, $83,038. Linda has also allocated an additional $90,000 for 2026 because we know that those increases are coming. We did have a webinar. We asked about the 2026 and if we should anticipate what was originally sent to us in the documentation. And they indicated that the Solicitor General has agreed to review it for 2026, but we don't have that answer yet. So we're trying to be proactive to allocate that additional $90,000, knowing that those increases are coming. And I think it's wise to continue to do that because basically, we're dealing with a contract that was well over a year old. And by the time we actually get caught up, they're going to be negotiating again. And we're probably going to be in the same situation. This time they were restricted to how much they could increase. So, they didn't communicate it well to prepare us for it. But unfortunately, they can't build in those redundancies. So we need to. Moving on to your public works budget, an overall increase of 7.03%. Again, just a bit of an overview, and I won't go into too much because I'll allow the managers to do that at the next meeting. The increase, again, administration increase of $174,234, mainly due to wages and benefits. Moving on to page 30, your Parks and Recreation budget. There is a little more of an increase here. And again, some of these, the reallocation of numbers, we were just kind of going through this. We've been trying to go through the existing budget as it stands and look at, things that we can present for February the 7th. So there are some numbers, not huge changes, but again, we look at the wages and the increase in insurance and fuel really do dictate a lot coming out of the Parks and Rec budget. So again, your overall increase of 23.51% or $240,378. And then your library budget submission with an increase of 6.558% or $42,238. Planning and development, your overall increase of 4.92%. Some of your new charges to your fees and charges bylaw. Again, the rate of development potentially declining with the uncertainty and our expenditures increasing due to the wages and benefits. The Lower Trent Conservation, it's probably important just to identify this because I know in the previous document when we show external budgets, it looks like it's significantly lower. So the Lower Trent Conservation Authority provided their increase at 11.9%, but because the source water protection expenditure was allocated incorrectly in 2024, Linda's made that correction in 2025. So when you look at the external budget, I think it looks like it's 0.18% or something as an increase, and that's why. Your building operating budget, again, anything that's coming into building this has to be revenue neutral. So there was some allocation made from reserves to make sure that that this is revenue neutral, although we are hoping for some increases this year with some development that's happening, which will assist those reserves in replenishing. Currently, it's a change of $22,000. Your bylaw department, an increase of 14.32%. Again, we've hired an additional bylaw enforcement officer, and we do hope to see, in some of these line items, I look at them and I feel like the revenues are hopefully a little bit conservative. And I think as we have some of these new staff members in place, that we'll have the ability to increase some of those fees. So although there's an increase in that department, hopefully it will be offset with some of that additional enforcement. So again, your overall increase is $5,145 or 14.32%. Economic development, relatively minor decrease of 2.03%. Again, I won't go into all of the specifics about what the Economic Development Department is responsible for. But as I'm looking at this, my apologies, your increase. Sorry, I was looking at the combined. So the increase for your specific Economic Development Department is $91,264, or an increase of 22.5% for the internal budgets. You have your outline there as far as the DBIA, the QEDC, and other amounts there to offset that cost. Your environmental services operating budget, again, these are all adjusted by rates, so your revenue and expenditures are offsetting. And transfers from reserves if required. And I think from here on out, we pretty much go into capital budget. So unless there's something specific that you want to review with capital, that wraps up our operating budget.
Your CAO, questions or comments from members of council? Councillor Wielden.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, CAO. At the very beginning of near the beginning on page 7, we've got the total municipal budget change. And I was just looking at the numbers. It looks like our revenues doubled between 2024 and 2025. That's a big change in numbers. The difference between the tax levy in both cases is pretty small, relatively, but the budget and revenue columns are significant changes. Can you comment on why that is?
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Wilden, the revenue also incorporates anything from development charges, anything that was a carryover from 2024. And there was a number of projects, if you go into that capital budget, that were carried over from 2024 that were never completed. So those revenues are reflected in that. And that's why it appears that there's additional revenue. It's just essentially an internal transfer from either reserves or those development charges.
Thank you. That makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Thank you both. Anyone else? Councillor Rowley.
Thank you, Mayor. To the CAO, excuse me, development charges, it seems like we've transferred out a significant amount. Is there a reason for that, for one thing? And is there kind of an annual limit that we are to take out, or can we just use it all if we require it? It just seems like we're going from a big chunk to, we're taking out 2/3 of it, correct?
CAO.
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Rowley, I agree. There are a number of items. I apologize. I don't have a specific answer for you. I think we've gone and we've taken a look at those development charges and what's available in them. It seems relatively reasonable. There was much less taken out previously. So I think, over time they build up and then you're able to then use them for these expenditures. Also, we're dealing with, a brand new study. So that will certainly make some changes to what we can allocate there. So my assumption, and it isn't completely an assumption, is that Director Whitfield was looking at, where they were sitting, the revenue that had been collected, and where we could utilize that for 2025 to offset our costs, knowing that the new rate study would come forward and there would be some additional revenue coming back into those fields.
Were these, as a follow-up to that, were these not transfers out this past year? Because we've got the balance ending 2023 at $4 million. We see the ins and the outs, and then the balance ending 2024. So these would have been all budgeted in the 2024 budget, these expenditures from the development charges. See how?
I would agree with you. These would have been. So I think if we were to cross-reference what is in the capital budget currently, some of these will be moved over from a
Right.
carryover, and then there would be additional ones as well.
Wondering then if at the top, because it says 2025 estimated activity, and that's kind of what I was looking at. So maybe that was a typo and I'm just getting it wrong. If you see that on the header.
Yeah, I see it.
Yeah.
Through Mr. Mayor, we'll do some additional digging just to be sure that we're providing the accurate information.
Yeah, something has to give there, either the 2025 at the top or the dates in the columns and rows below. Same with every other chart here on these 2 pages. Anyone else? Go ahead.
Looking on page 13, the amount that might be borrowed for the new fire station, just wanting to know where we are in the process with that. That seems to be a pretty hard and fast number as far as that what we would probably need to build a new station or whatever, but just wondering where we are in the process for this year.
Do you want me to send that to the chief? Chief Thompson?
So through your worship to Councillor Rowley, we have been meeting with the county. That number is based on the average cost of square foot to build throughout the province. So it's not a hard and fast number at this time. But we are negotiating with other resources and funding opportunities, and we'll know more soon, hopefully.
Thank you both. Anyone else? So CIO, you were looking for a target from council, I think, is what you mentioned. I know if I ask that, I'm going to get at least one member of council, sorry, Jeff, but lecture us on the value of $1 and the value of budgeting accurately and not worrying about target numbers. However, at the end of the day, staff need to know where our comfort zone is. So I'm going to ask the question at the risk of what may come next. So, members of council, what are we comfortable with? Where things are, where if we were to add all of the grants and aid within reason, we'd be pushing almost 10% here, and I'm not sure I'm comfortable with that, frankly, at the end of the day. So I ask, where's your number, Councillor Rowley?
But basically waiting for Mr. Puffer for the blended rate as well. That might make a little bit of a difference. I'm certainly maybe not comfortable at 10%, but at 7+, I'm fine. So I'll just wait to hear the end number from Mr. Puffer at some point.
Mr. Puffer, Deputy Treasurer, pardon me, do you have a blended number for us? He's not in IT, it's okay.
Through the chair, to Councillor Rowley, the blended number at this point is about 8.4% in consideration of the county levy increase of 6.12%, the education levy being flat at 0, and our preliminary numbers at this point. That increase is based on an assessment value of $400,000 for a residential property. You're welcome.
Thank you. Councillor Wheeldon.
To second what Councillor Rowley said, I'm not terribly comfortable at 10%, but the 7 to 8% range seems fine to me. I do like the idea of capping grants and aid at the 1%. And so we will go through that process yet again. But I guess I also know that there are some priorities that we have the choice of whether or not to make them priorities. 2025 is the deadline for AODA compliance in the province of Ontario. Almost nobody is going to be compliant, but we have the choice to be compliant. We could actually budget for that and hold up our end.
Yeah, and we really should be endeavoring to be compliant or better than compliant if we can be, especially given the community's demographic. And you know, I think that it would be appropriate. It would be appropriate anyway. I'm not sure that even if we try, we'll get there, but it's possible. And even if we're a little bit ahead of our friends and neighbors around us, I think we'll be tackling a good deal. Go ahead.
Following up on that, we do have even a heading here about accessibility related projects, and there are four bullet points here.
Could you give us the page number you're on?
I'm on page number 4.
Thank you.
Right underneath impact to the taxpayer.
Yep.
Paved trails to playgrounds, trails with accessible components, including asphalt, sidewalk replacement on Prince Edward Street, harbor between Edgewater and Wallace Street, and new sidewalk on Wallace Street. One-stop accessible counter at 35 Alice Street. So I know that the accessible counter is elsewhere in the budget. Are these other things elsewhere in the budget?
CAO?
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Wheeldon, they are. So
Okay.
you do have your parks budget, which is some of those paved trails at 114,000, which was carried over from last year. And the Wallace Street, off the top of my head, I don't know where it's allocated, but yes, we have had discussions about those being allocated in the budget.
Okay. If I may ask, Deputy Clerk, I know you also have a laundry list. Is that reflected here?
Deputy Clerk?
No, it's not necessarily reflected there. There's some good projects that have been included, which is exciting, and I'm sure the committee will be happy to hear about. That said, as you said, there's a lot of work to be done, and as the mayor said, you know, we could spend a lot of money trying to fix everything. It would take quite a lot to get everything where we want to be. But steps are steps, and the more steps we take in the right direction, the better we will be.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I just point out that Wallace, as an example, Wallace Street is listed both on road reconstruction and on storm and wastewater sewer reconstruction. So that entire roadway is scheduled for reconstruction. And when we do that, we have had a good habit of redoing or adding sidewalks in those locations as well to endeavor to make Brighton a more walkable community. I don't know how well it's working, but we're trying. Councillor Botwell.
With respect to what kind of number for a target, I'm not terribly comfortable with 8%. I don't like the number 8 in this case. I think that it needs to be mentioned that with not having the reassessments done for so long, this really ties our hands with being able to continue to provide the services that the municipality needs when the assessed values have not been addressed. So I just thought it's important to make that point. I'm not comfortable with anything over 8%. I'm not even terribly comfortable with 7%. But I recognize that we don't always have the freedom to just willy-nilly choose a number without there being a reduction in services and us continuing to take those steps towards where we should be, not would like to be. So that's all I want to say.
Thank you for that. Just want to point out the whole assessment thing. If all of the assessments were redone tomorrow and everything being equal, we would still have to increase taxes, right? To the whatever percentage our budget increases, because our mill rate then goes down as assessments go up. It's not a windfall for the municipality. But I think that that's the sort of the optics that the provincial government's looking at in not reassessing. They're saying, well, we're holding your assessments still. It's just creating a false sense of where the world is and not really not doing anything for anybody, except we don't know what the value of properties are in our municipality or any other across the province of Ontario. It's just defeating the purpose of actual value assessment at the end of the day. Councillor Rowley?
Thank you. Can I ask a question on the capital budget side of the book that we got tonight? On page 55.
But I can't guarantee we have the staff here who can
Nope.
answer it because we're not ready for that. But
That's all right.
you go
but
ahead.
I'm
Ask-
just
ask
going to
your
ask the question. And as you said earlier, the CAO said we are meeting again on next Friday. So maybe by then, I'm fine waiting for an answer until then. Environmental Advisory Committee, $80,000. In last year, there was 73,000 plus, so I'm guessing maybe it's just a small increase. What's planned for those dollars? That's 0.75% in our taxes. I just would like to know what the plan for those dollars are.
CAO?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Rowley, I'm not sure the 73,000. So there's some verbiage in here where the Environmental Advisory Committee and the Sustainability or Director Walsh could correct me. There's a Sustainability Committee and they're interchangeable. So there was an amount allocated last year for $100,000, which for some reason translated into 80. You will see the 100 come back in the next budget, and that is for the contract that is being done right now on our sustainability plan. So that was tendered and it came in almost at $100,000. So that is allocated for that specific project.
And that RFP was directed last year. So
Correct.
that does not impact this year's tax
Correct.
base. Okay, thank you.
So, okay, so that was my question then. This is just a carryover from last year. So there's no extra dollars except for the 20,000 to bring it up to the 100,000. Is that what you're saying? So 80,000 from a carryover. Plus you need to find 20,000 to come up to the $100,000 report.
CAO?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, there was actually $100,000 allocated last year. So I'm not sure why the reduction was put in at 80. Director Walsh and I have gone back to take a look. We've confirmed the amount that we need and it is 100,000, but there will be no impact. It is entirely a carryover from 2024.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councillor Wright?
On page 42 is where I'm looking, which I think we're into the capital side still as well. I had a few questions, comments about starting with the generator carryover. Is that fully funded by that modernization fund reserve? Is that requiring any tax money at this point?
CAO?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Wright. The 125,000 is entirely a carryover. It wasn't completed in anticipating the new fire hall and whether or not there could be something combined. I think in our recent discussions, we've determined it's still better to keep them separate. So we've carried that over again for 2025 and expect that we will move forward with that generator.
Okay. And for the 150,000 for the finance counter and reception renovations, is that strictly to bring us up to that AODA requirements? Or are we moving the office entirely? It just seems like a lot of money.
Yeah.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Wright. The partially for the accessibility component, I think just the ease for the consumer coming in. And again, it's a little bit difficult whether you're going to finance, whether you're going to clerks. Occasionally we have to send them back to Sharp, which will make, continue to happen. But to have somebody come in and just have that open space, we are taking a look at potentially having some drawings done, providing that we have support from council in the budget, but it will just open up that area. So when you come up, it will be open. The finance staff in behind, we're looking at modifying some of that office space. So again, it's just a little bit more inviting, and we would have the ability to pull from that staff to come to the counter without, having to go back and go into an office. And really it's just for the municipal, the taxpayers, the whomever is coming in, to make it that much more inviting and a more pleasant experience, and the ability to be a little more efficient, in addition to the accessibility component.
So is that them coming in down here and there'd be like a desk down here, or?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Wright, it would be where the existing finance area is. You just
Okay.
wouldn't have to go through a door. Like, we're going to
I see.
open it up
I see, okay.
and make it a little more inviting.
Gotcha. Okay. And the other comment in the same area is the council chambers renovation. As much as I would love to see a renovation, I just don't know that this is the year to do it, given the circumstances. It just seems like it takes half a point maybe.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
It's not something we need to do, but it's entirely funded out of reserves.
Is
So
it? Okay.
yeah, removing it
Okay.
removing it would be for optics and
Yeah.
look around.
Gotcha. Yeah. No, I know.
As much as I love meeting in my mother's 1974 basement, it is entirely being funded from reserve, so there
Okay.
would be no impact to the taxpayer one way or the other.
Got it.
Sorry, I think I stole the deputy treasurer's joke, and now he's laughing at me or with me. Anyone else? So if I'm reading council correctly, nobody's comfortable with anything over 7%, which means we need to find a couple percent in order to be then able to add any grants and aid. And I think our intent might be to keep grants and aid a little lean by the sounds of things on this side of the table. So I'm actually okay with that this year, given the pressures on the municipality. Does anyone disagree with that? Councillor Rowley?
I don't disagree with you. However, depending on where these cuts comes, I certainly don't want to see our level of service go down. I think we have, over the last few years, recognized that our level of service needs to be better than the status quo. And so in order to do that, we have to pay for that. So if we can take a little bit away from grants and aid or whatever, or that's it, kind of lean it out a little bit, I am not in favor at this particular time to strip away what we have worked so hard to get to a certain level of service, knowing that in future years, we are going to have to stay a little bit lean. And if we do it too much this year, we're going to really either double up next year or just, we're going to be back to where we were maybe a few years ago. I'm quite pleased to see that the level of service that our staff makes a great effort to do for our community, and I would hate to see that kind of slide back again.
I would echo those comments 100%. I think we've done a tremendous, I think staff have done a tremendous deal of work getting us to where we are from a service level, and I wouldn't want to see that go backwards either. I think we are where we should be, and if there's opportunity to improve on that, great. But if 2% takes us down even 0.5% in service levels, I think we need to re-examine that and provide the funding we need to provide to make sure that service level stays up. I agree with you. And I don't know how council feels about what I'm about to say next, but there are things that, for example, that are landing in grants and aid that I'm wondering if we should as a council, have a conversation about around policy. And of course, I'm not speaking of any specific cemeteries because I wouldn't want to do that. But for cemeteries, as an example, I'm not sure should be considered grants and aid. The cost of operating the cemeteries right now is incredibly inexpensive. And if any of these folks, as we know, were to abandon their cemetery, the municipality has an obligation under the law to take over those cemeteries. And now we're talking about very significant costs when the municipality does those things. So right now we help volunteers by contributing to their coffers, provide the service in the community. And so we don't need to have the conversation tonight. I'm just introducing the subject tonight so that we can have it maybe when we talk about grants and aid. I think this year we're stuck, obviously, but next year I think we could provide, for next year, I think we'd be wise to provide direction that those things and maybe other things that are currently listed in grants and aid should be more operational in nature. And how we do that, I don't know, but that would be a problem we would pass over to staff to figure out. Councillor Rowley.
Dare I say that's two things we agreed on.
Oh, goodness.
And I wasn't going to bring it up tonight because it is grants and aid, so I will wait to hear commentary next week.
Well, you'll hear something very similar next week, but there it is. Councillor Wielden.
I was going to say the same. And that was part of the thing I wanted to talk about when I brought up, could we do grants and aid differently in future? I would say similarly to healthcare related requests, these are things that are not necessarily charities. These are essential services that somehow we are still required to pay for at this level. So there's lots to unpack there, but looking at places to potentially trim or potentially ask other levels of government for, that crossed my mind.
Yeah, I think the good example in that, Councillor Wielden, is that, there was a time, before my time on council, but there was a time when hospital foundations could depend on the community to provide the value that they needed to purchase beds and those pieces of equipment for the hospitals. And those pieces of equipment are now so exponentially more expensive that, Mr. and Mrs. Smith just can't afford to be providing that kind of money out of their pocketbook. So they come to the municipality in order for us to fund from the collective. And more and more of this becomes the case. And, that's where we find ourselves providing donations to organizations because the community just can't. So we have to push it out over a vast majority of people rather than getting the same dozen people or whatever in the community providing all the funding. 10% of your volunteers do all the work, right? Anyone else? I'm trying not to stretch this out, and yet a 1 hour meeting seems light, so. But if we're happy, if we're happy or equally unhappy, then we can come back on Friday next week and have more fulsome discussions and deliberations on the budget, and staff will endeavor to bring some numbers to us that operationally reduce things by 2% so that we can flesh this stuff out. Fair enough? I have a motion moved by Councillor Rowley, seconded by Deputy Mayor Anderson, that Council receive for information the draft 2025 operating budget.
Can I make a comment before we finish out with that?
You may.
Just based on your comment to staff about fleshing out 2%, please only flush it out if you can.
Yeah.
Don't flush it out if things are required. I'm good with flushing out 1%.
And equally important, when you flesh out the 2%, we want to know what is being left behind. What are we losing by taking out 2% off the table? Or were you able to find efficiencies? That's always my favorite, by the way. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. Anything further from members of council? All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. You can have whatever you want now, but I haven't adjourned the meeting yet. I know, I've lost my agenda. Okay. That brings us to question period. Does the member in the gallery have any questions with regard to anything on this evening's agenda? We have no in-camera session. It is, what time is it? 6 o'clock even. I will adjourn this committee of the whole meeting with my thanks to everyone.